Darktide Extraction is an ambitious and evocative expansion for Wrath and Glory, bringing the grim horror of Warhammer 40,000 to life through a perilous descent into the hive city of Tertium. Designed to mirror the co-op gameplay and drastic elements of Warhammer 40,000 Darktide, this module offers players an intense, high-stakes adventure in which they must navigate the festering underbelly of a hive city to prevent an apocalyptic catastrophe. Needless to say, spoilers ahead. So what does this book have to offer? At its core, Darktide Extraction is a deep, multi-layered adventure that unfolds across multiple chapters, each with unique challenges, factions and deadly encounters. Players take on the role of a team of Tier 2 agents, enlisted by the enigmatic Inquisitor Grendel to secure an ancient piece of archaeotech hidden deep within the Snake Stack. An enormous ventilation shaft filled with criminals, scavengers and the festering corruption of Nurgle. Let's take a look at the key features of this adventure. The book provides an expansive and immersive look at Hive Tertium, showcasing its decaying infrastructure, teeming slums, industrial ruins, and gang-controlled districts. The Snake Stack itself is a masterfully realised environment, a decaying labyrinth of cables, rusting machinery, and polluted sump lakes, all presented with deep lore and evocative descriptions. Unlike many linear adventures, Darktide Extraction allows for significant player agency. Whether through brute force, diplomacy, subterfuge, or careful negotiation with the Hive's desperate inhabitants, players have multiple ways to tackle problems. The adventure presents a variety of factions that players can ally with or oppose, each with its own motivations and dangers. Clan Mechanicus is a gang of fraudsters posing as Adeptus Mechanicus, ruling the Slung settlement through manipulation and brute force. Then there's the Slung themselves, a desperate group of exiles and scavengers barely surviving under the Snake Stack. Also, there's the Mobian Sixth, corrupted Astra Militarum traitors working in service to Nurgle. And finally, the Momentine Order, an isolated sect of tech priests devoted to maintaining the Forge Father, a massive locomotive that traverses the Iron Collar. Let's talk about the themes that you'll find in this book. The book leans heavily into the grimdark horror, with themes of mutation, corruption, and the ever-present risk of falling to chaos. Players will uncover twisted cults, horrific mutations, and face moral dilemmas that force them to question their own survival instincts. Combat is varied and dynamic, with encounters taking place in hazardous multi-level environments such as collapsing platforms, toxic sludge seas, and malfunctioning machinery. Players will battle hordes of plague-ridden horrors, rival gangs, and mechanized monstrosities. The module introduces Hive Encounters, a system for procedural exploration, where each new location presents random hazards, faction conflicts, or rare bounties to discover. This adds replayability and unpredictability to the adventure, and can also be an incredibly useful tool in Hive settings outside of Tertium and in your own games. Let's talk about the setting. One of Darktide Extraction's greatest triumphs is its incredible depth of setting design, which immerses players in the grimdark, decaying nightmare of Hive Tertium. Unlike many Warhammer 40k RPG settings that rely on broad, overarching lore, this adventure drills down deep into the filth of a single Hive city and makes it feel alive, oppressive, and terrifying. From the grandeur of the Iron Collar's dying Mechanicus Order to the festering corruption in the Slugworks, Darktide Extraction delivers one of the most immersive Hive settings ever presented in Wrath and Glory. Every location is layered with history, social tensions, and environmental hazards, making it not just a backdrop but an active force that shapes the campaign. The setting of Hive Tertium is not just a passive environment, it is an active, decaying beast threatening to swallow the players whole. The book goes beyond basic descriptions of Hive life and provides a fully realised world that feels like it had been lived in for a millennia. One of the most unique aspects of Darktide Extraction is its focus on the Snake Stack, a ventilation megastructure that feeds breathable air into the Hive. Rather than just another gang-ridden slum, the Snake Stack is constantly shifting, decaying, and violently contested battleground. The Iron Collar, an ancient Mechanicus-controlled ring, was once a masterpiece of engineering, Now it's a crumbling monument to decay, religious obsession, and slow mechanical death. Then there's the Lattice, a death trap of wires and wind. It's an industrial spiderweb of failing turbine supports and is one of the most unique locations in any 40k RPG. Players must cross it while fighting off enemy forces, all while dodging collapsing walkways, malfunctioning machinery, and gale force winds. It feels like something straight out of a Darktide mission, dangerous, chaotic, and brutally intense. So how does Darktide Extraction capture the 4-player co-op experience? Darktide Extraction is an exceptional recreation of the visceral squad-based action of Warhammer 40,000 Darktide, masterfully translating the video game's cooperative chaos into the structured yet dynamic world of tabletop roleplaying. Where Darktide thrives on tight-knit teamwork, desperate battles against overwhelming forces, and the ever-present sense of decay and dread, Darktide Extraction mirrors this intensity through its narrative structure, encounter design, and thematic execution. Both the video game and this RPG adventure throw players into the depths of Hive Tertium as expendable rejects, serving a higher authority that sees them as little more than tools for a dangerous mission. The tone of grim desperation is carried across beautifully, with every encounter dripping in the same bleakness that defines Darktide. Players aren't leading a glorious charge, they're clawing through filth, battling heretics in the dark, and barely making it out alive. Darktide the game is built around a 4-player co-op, with each class fulfilling a specific battlefield role. Darktide Extraction translates this same tactical operation into Wrath and Glory's mechanics by making teamwork essential for survival. Players are encouraged to take on complementary roles, mirroring Darktide's class-based gameplay. The RPG doesn't rigidly enforce this, but through the challenges presented, a strong team composition such as a frontline tank, a long-range specialist, a medic, and a tech-savvy character proves invaluable. This adventure is packed with combat encounters that feel like classic Darktide Horde moments. The Hive is alive with chaos, featuring mob-based enemies like plague-ridden cultists, mutants, and the Mobian Sixth Troopers, forcing players to work together to survive waves of overwhelming foes. Several encounters feature escalating waves of enemies, forcing players to either hold the line or find an escape route, just like in Darktide's extraction sequences. Like the shifting battlefields of Darktide, the RPG version keeps fights engaging with environmental hazards like collapsing walkways, acid rain, and industrial machinery that can be used to the player's advantage. New threats and hazards in Darktide Extraction. One of Darktide Extraction's strongest features is its variety of unique threats and environmental hazards, bringing new layers of danger to the already perilous world of Wrath and Glory. The adventure introduces new enemies, encounter mechanics, and environmental dangers, all designed to replicate the chaos of Darktide's Hive City setting. Here is a breakdown of some of these new threats. Stack Scurrers. These bat-like creatures nest within the snake stack, coating themselves in toxic hive sludge. Their primary attack involves spitting corrosive slime, which can melt armour and poison their victims. They often attack in swarms, forcing players into desperate fights on unstable ledges. Lattice Springers. Armed with 6 legs and a poisonous bite, these strange arthropods are both rumoured to either be from off-world or native to the wild's fauna. Clan Mechanicus Gangers. Clan Mechanicus is a gang of con artists posing as Adeptus Mechanicus. They control the slung by monopolising power supplies and intimidating workers. Some have self-inflicted cybernetic modifications, granting them crude mechanical abilities. The Mobian Sixth. These Astra Militarum defectors serve as Darktide Extractor's most persistent human enemies. Some still resemble trained soldiers, while others have succumbed to mutation and decay. Variants of these include veteran troopers, heavy gunners, and plague-rotted officers. Demon Hosts. A former Imperial citizen, this host for a bound demon serves as a horrifying foe in the Sludgeworks. It fights with both psychic and physical attacks, and its death releases a warp shockwave. Groaner Hordes and Poxbringers. These zombie-like creatures flood battlefields in large numbers, requiring players to prioritise targets before being overwhelmed. So here's my final thoughts. Cubicle 7 has done an incredible job in translating the essence of Darktide's brutal, fast-paced co-op action into the narrative-driven world of Wrath and Glory. Whether it's through dynamic combat, escalating mission tension, environmental hazards, or the ever-looming corruption of Nurgle, Darktide Extraction delivers the same desperate struggle for survival that makes the video game so compelling. For Darktide players looking to bring the co-op experience to the tabletop, Darktide Extraction is a must-play, a brutal, immersive and tactically rewarding adventure that captures the very essence of Hive Tertium. While the adventure is structured, it leaves enough flexibility for the players to make meaningful choices and shape the story through their actions. It introduces a vast range of new enemies and hazards, creating an RPG experience that mirrors the game's cooperative tension. From mutant-infested tunnels to collapsing industrial walkways, every encounter forces players to think on their feet, or risk being claimed by the horrors of the Tertium Hive. The setting design in Darktide Extraction is nothing short of phenomenal. Unlike generic descriptions of Hive cities, this book brings Hive Tertium to life as a decaying, festering machine where every faction, every ruin, and every malfunctioning turbine tells a story. These descriptions are accompanied with beautiful artwork. Key strengths: incredibly immersive environmental storytelling, the Hive feels lived in and actively decaying, factions that feel real with internal conflicts and believable motivations. The Hive encounter system makes every session unpredictable and dangerous and can be applied to other games as well. Unique locations like the Snake Stack, the Lattice, the Iron Collar, they all feel different and feel like something out of Darktide's best missions. Minor weaknesses are the sheer amount of lore and environmental detail may overwhelm newer GMs, requiring some preparation to be used effectively, and there's always a lack of detailed maps, something I find quite common with Cubicle 7 adventures. Overall though, if you want a Warhammer 40k RPG that truly makes you feel like you're fighting in the depths of a doomed Hive city, Darktide Extraction is essential.